Welcome to the LG Wheelhouse. I am your host, SirMikeKnight. With me, as always, is Hutch and Colonel. What's going on, guys?
Not too much. And yourself?
I'm doing fine. We had a 2-week break. We were unable to record last week due to personal matters. Pretty much all of us had a bunch of personal shit going on last weekend, right? So we were unable to record last week. We were unable to give you the first round predictions. But we're going to jump right into the show. The first topic we've got is... That's right, Ric Flair. Ric Flair, the nature boy. Styling and profiling all the way out of the league. Hutch.
Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty big thing coming out of round one. I mean, heading into the playoffs, I think Bennington was certainly a team to watch out for. And, losing Ric Flair, he finished 6th in the league in scoring. It was definitely a big blow to the team, but, I reached out to the BOG just to see what was going on, and I did receive quite a bit of information. Apparently Ric Flair has been complaining about his line mates. I know that often happens in LG, but, he was publicly and, pretty vocal about his line mates. So, a bit of tit for tat back and forth there, and then all of a sudden Ric Flair posts in the team chat saying that he was done and the GM could ECU for him for the rest of the playoffs. So, heading into Game 6, they lose one of their best players. It is kind of a blow to the whole team as such. And from what I've been hearing, he's... And like I said, this is just from what I'm hearing. He was pretty childish about the whole scenario going down. I reached out to, some staff in Bennington, and, basically what they told me is that he turned his back on the team. He wanted certain line mates removed. He kind of wanted to call shots. I guess he thought, being number 6 in the league in scoring, that, that kind of gave him the ability to call shots. But basically, the management team said, no, we run this team, and what we say, go. And from that, he kind of went on a tailspin and said, I no longer want to play for this team. He kind of lost his shit and, pretty well, ruined Bennington's plans in the playoffs. Now, that's nothing against Albany. They played a tough series there, and kudos to them for winning that series. But, losing Ric Flair for Bennington, that was a big blow. And, just to gather some further information to kind of verify all this stuff, I reached out to our Board of Governors, and, they did verify that he posted in the team chat that he no longer wanted to play. And, of course, this is against league rules, and for refusing to play, you automatically get a 3-season ban. I've heard that Rick has since put in an appeal, but, from what we've gathered, that this appeal is probably not going to go through, and it looks like he's going to be gone for 3 seasons.
Yikes. If you really want to take over a team, why not just be a GM? Like, really? Colonel, you got anything to say about this?
It's always interesting to see players kind of act out, I guess, when they don't get their way, especially ones who are kind of high profile like Ric Flair. I think that it's extremely childish to put your own wants and needs ahead of your team's, regardless, because the whole idea of this is for everyone to come on and in the playoffs, especially, to try to just come together and win a championship. It's not really won by one player, or sometimes lost by one player, but in this case, Binghamton was leaning pretty heavy on Ric Flair, so it doesn't surprise me that Albany pretty much walked all over him in games 2 through 5 or whatever it was, because Binghamton won the first game and then Albany just took over and won the rest. So if you've got internal issues going on like that with Ric Flair or whoever it may be, it's really difficult to deal with as a general manager. And I was fortunate. Most of the players I've played with, I haven't had a big outburst like that. But if it were to happen, it's a terrible thing. when I was a manager, I always like to put my players first and try to make sure everyone was happy. And if that means like babysitting certain players' egos, I mean that's what it takes. Sometimes you've got to favor other players a little bit more than some of the, we'll say, easier to get along with players. Ric Flair, if he's like a known, we'll say, hothead, someone who's going to freak out at his teammates and stuff, sometimes maybe you got to put him with your other good line mates just to satisfy his needs at the time. If the other team, if it gets you wins, that's all that really matters. But I wouldn't have a player like him on my team, especially knowing this now. I like to pick my players very carefully and have players who are easy to get along with and who are willing to, sacrifice for the greater good of the team.
Yeah, and just before we move on there, I'd also like to point out that in his last 4 games, he was 0-4, had 0 goals, 3 assists, and he was a -7. So, if he is indeed this childish character that he's been made out to be, losing 4 games in a row to someone with a big ego can really damper the situation. So, that may have been what ignited his drive to get off of his line or to get certain teammates removed from his line. But at the same time, if you play with these guys all season long and just lose a couple games here and there, I mean, what's the big deal, You guys obviously have chemistry. He finished 6th in the league in scoring, so, I mean, he didn't obviously do that all on his own. He had 31 goals and 31 assists, but, I mean, obviously someone else on that line is scoring as well, so... I seriously don't think that playoffs is a time to have a meltdown. I think that sometimes you kind of have to swallow your own pride and kind of take one for the team here. And to be completely honest with you, I'm really disappointed in Ric Flair. He's been a player that's been mentioned quite a bit on our show. He's been a player to watch 2 weeks in a row, actually. And, it's really disappointing to me because I thought that he was one of the guys on an upswing and, someone to look forward to in the future. But clearly he's, gone off the deep end and he's going to be gone for 3 seasons.
All right. Well, let's move on. I think we've talked about this quite a bit. Let's move on to round 1 shockers. Hutch.
Well, one thing that really stood out to me in round 1 is probably the forfeits. This is playoff time, and teams that are making the playoffs, you can't be forfeiting games. From what I've seen, there was 3 forfeits in the first round. There was a Lake Erie forfeit to Oklahoma City, Hershey forfeited Game 4 to Norfolk, and also Springfield forfeited to Worcester. So, I mean, obviously, I've heard rumors of connection issues and whatnot, but I mean, it's playoff time. It's really not the time to be forfeiting games, especially in a series that that's kind of going somewhere for your team. You just can't throw away games. And I mean, in addition to these 3 forfeits, there was also a game that was overturned for not following the rule whereby each player has to play in at least one of the first 4 games. Being former management myself, you really had to watch this kind of stuff. And, people are going to be watching your team to make sure that you play each and every player in one of the first 4 games. So, I mean, you just can't get away with this stuff. It's playoff time. Everyone's going to be looking for a win, no matter how they get it. So, I mean, the round 1 shocker for me is, these forfeits and, games that have just been thrown away. I mean, it's playoff time, and personally, I think it's inexcusable.
Hey, you're just lucky that you guys ended up playing against one of the best managers in the league. Otherwise, you guys would have forfeited game 2. Just saying. Colonel.
When it comes to shockers, I mean, I totally agree with Hutz saying that there shouldn't be forfeits at this stage in the game. I understand that it happens, and I mean, sometimes you just can't get your guys, and it's summer season too, so it's kind of hard to keep interest, even despite the fact that it's the playoffs. But I mean, you see so many forfeits, and you wonder, like, what did you guys sign up for? We're looking for managers who, like yourself, Mike. Now, you guys showed up for all of your games, and our series was played very respectfully, and kudos to you guys for that, because it's not always easy when you're going up against a really good team, and sometimes you're just like, oh, fuck it, we might not make it through or whatever, so people don't show up, but you guys did. And as for like other shockers in regards to people winning out, I mean, the Marlies and Ice Hogs series that went to 7 games, that was a pretty big shock to me. There's a couple of games there where the Marlies got 9 goals. It was I think Wagner, he's got like 17 points in that first round, so that was pretty crazy to see someone get 17 points in the first 3 playoff games. That's a lot. I mean, it's just a really high-scoring series. The whole thing was, I mean, even Rockford, they were getting like 3 goals almost every other game. So just the amount of goals or the lack of defense or the lack of goaltending that went on in that series was a bit of a shock to me.
All right, well, round run shockers for me, and it's not really a shocker for me. It seemed to be a shocker for the rest of the AHL making these predictions. Worcester making it out of the first round. That doesn't shock me. Does that shock either one of you?
Not personally. I think that Wheelhouse has definitely put together a respectable team there. You know, he went out at the trade deadline and acquired Joe K5, who he actually talked about when he was a special guest on our show. You know, he has a real good feel for the players around the league. You know, he knew that going into the playoffs, he was going to have to face some tough teams, you know. In the Eastern Conference, there's no cakewalk. You know, 1 through 8, each team could have made it through. You know, so personally, I think that, you know, it's not a surprise to me that Worcester made it through. I'm kind of surprised that, you know, Springfield had to forfeit a couple games along the way. I know that, you know, Winston has mentioned that there were some connection issues and whatnot, but at the same time, you know, Springfield was kind of a team that, in the back of my mind, I thought we may face in the second round. And, you know, to see Worcester get through, you know, I'm not entirely surprised. At the same time, I'm a little surprised that Springfield didn't put up a bit more of a fight. But, you know, to answer your question, no, I'm not surprised that Worcester made it through.
And that, I mean, that's not taking anything against, you know, taking anything away from Springfield. I'm just saying, this is the reason why I'm putting this in the shocker list. All right. Now, let me just read some of these predictions as far as this round goes. All right. Springfield in 7. Springfield in 6. Springfield in 7. I haven't yet come across anybody who has said that Worcester would win this, right? Here we go. Worcester in 7. Springfield in 6. Springfield in 7. This is why I'm putting it in the shocker list. Springfield in 6. Springfield in 7. Because almost nobody picked Worcester to win that series. Except for Horton, who joked around saying Worcester in 4 all by forfeit. But
I guess he was partially right there in the forfeits.
And that's a good point. I'm pretty sure he was on IR for this whole week, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe that Winston was mentioning something about Horton on the IR. He did mention a couple other key players that, you know, kind of went on last-minute vacations. And like Colonel alluded to earlier, you know, it is the summer season. And, you know, things come up. And unfortunately, you know, sometimes LG has to suffer. But, you know, it is unfortunate that it happened during the playoffs. And, you know, Springfield did have a very formidable team heading into the playoffs. And, you know, had everything lined up properly, maybe we would have seen a different result here. But at the same time, I do not think that we can take anything away from what Wheelhouse has done in Worcester. And, you know, I guess that's just life. I mean, you know, in Syracuse, we really made sure that, you know, everyone was going to show up. You know, it was very important to us to make sure that everyone was on board and, you know, everything is always well calculated. You know, we know when someone's not going to be around. We know when this is going to happen. And in the event that something does happen, you know, there's always 2 or 3 guys lined up ready to just jump into the lineup. So, you know, even like when we played you guys in game 1, you know, our goalie didn't show up and we had to get an ECU and we had him in a matter of like 1 minute, you know, like it's just, yeah, I really don't know what else to say, right?
Right. I mean, you get on early as management, right? You either get on yourself or you have somebody get on, and you get on about a half hour before game time. Now that's what I do. If by 15 minutes before game time I don't have everybody, or at least a hey, yeah, I'll be there right on time from everybody, I'm looking for an ECU.
Yeah.
I got somebody in that party, and I go, hey, if this guy doesn't show up at this time, you're in.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it did help that actually my ECU, my training camp was full of great people willing to play whenever. So I mean that helped, and I want to say thank you to my TC. Sorry we couldn't make it past the first round for you guys, but I mean that's what you got to do as management. You got to get on, you got to get you guys together, and if you don't hear from them 15 minutes before game time, start looking for an ECU. That doesn't mean that you have to ECU that player. That just means you get him in a party and you go, hey, if this guy doesn't show up, we need you.
Exactly.
And most of the TC guys are like, all right, yeah, just let me know.
Yep.
So
And I mean, that's something that last season in Syracuse that me and Prowsey really worked on is to, get these guys on our training camp that we kind of know, or we can rely on. And going into the playoffs, you know that you can't use prospects as ECU, so you know that you need a couple veterans or RVs on your training camp that you can call upon in a couple minutes notice, and these guys will come and play for you. So I'm not sure if that's like some kind of issue on the management part in Springfield or not, but I mean, I think that Winston and Horton done a great job managing all season. I'm not really sure how things panned out in the end, but obviously something happened that they forfeited a couple games, and people went on vacation last minute. It's kind of unfortunate for them, but at the same time, it's the reality of the league, and you always kind of have. You always need a bit of foresight when going into the playoffs. You need a backup plan. You need these people that you can get in. Well, if I need 5 ECUs in the series, I got these 5 guys. I've messaged them and told them, listen, be on standby for the playoffs, and they've responded and said, yes, we can be on standby. Right. So I mean, it's something that in Syracuse last season, and I know Prowsey even this season has been, really getting people on the training camp that he knows he can call in last minute. And personally, I think that's a very important, tool for a general manager to have when these guys are just, kind of there at your beck and call.
All right. Well, moving on. Let's talk about round 1 MVPs. Hutch, you want to start us off?
All right. So one person that I think really stood out in round 1, I think from the Albany Devils, their goaltender, Go Heels 2. He was 3-0-0. He had a .67 goals against average with a .941 save percentage to go with that. He had 34 shots against, so he was in the 3 games he played. He averaged around 11.3 per game. Albany finished 4th, and he played against Binghamton, so that's a tough 4-5 series. So I mean, in the 4-5 series is probably the most unpredictable series as such. You never know who's going to win that series. And I mean, even if you look back at his season, he went 8-5-2. He had a 2.90 goals against average, .761 save percentage. But one really key factor that I looked at was he is actually 12-0-1 in his last 13 games. So that's including 3 playoff games and heading back into the regular season. So personally, I think this guy's on fire. He's definitely an MVP of round 1.
All right, Colonel.
I think for my MVP, I might give it to both goalies in one series, actually. The Utica and Texas series. We've got in Ole 31, and I'm pretty sure Grazer would have been their 2 goaltenders. And both of them came out of the series on fire. Utica won like most of their games by 1 goal. Most of the games were 1-goal games, like 2-goal game. And there's one exception here. Game 5 was 8-2 Utica win. I'm not exactly sure what happened in that game, but that series was extremely tight. And both those teams were really close. And I think it was a real hard-fought series where the Utica goalie, Mr. Ole 31, came out on top. And I really think if they didn't have him, they would not have come out of that series on top of Texas. So I'm going to give it to Ole 31. He's definitely stand out.
You're going to give it to Ole. You also got to give it to Eliash, his partner in crime there. Eliash with 2 goals against average, and the save percentage was a little bit better than Ole's at 86.7. And Pitwinkle was the other goaltender in Texas.
And I think too, sorry to cut you off there, but before we move on, I think we also got to look at the fact that Utica actually claimed Eliash off of waivers way back on August the 8th. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that's a very big pickup for them. He was on waivers, susceptible to be picked up from anyone, and Utica took the dive. They took up Eliash, and I think that he's paid off great dividends for him.
All right, I'm going to have to give it to Wagner out of Toronto. Wagner currently leading in points at 17, 5 goals, which is tied for first in goals and assists. He's number 1 overall with 12. So Wagner scoring some points in the playoffs. Moving on, we're going to start talking about the round 2 series. We're also going to give you our predictions. Let's see. We're going to start with Syracuse and Albany. Do you guys want to give your predictions there? I mean, we obviously know what your answer is.
Well, I'm not going to give a prediction, but I will read out a couple notes that I've made here. So we're just looking back first at the season series. Syracuse won the season series 4 games to 1. However, when you really look into it, Syracuse only outscored Albany 14-13. So there's a lot of close games, a lot of one-goal games there. I think that moving into the series, there's some really key players we need to watch on both sides. We'll start off with Syracuse. They've got Gumba, Ambient, and I think Drake are very, very big players to watch. And in Albany, I think that you've got to watch B-Man 1227, Go Heels 2, and Jabroni. So, the goaltending duo in Albany could be a key factor in this series. So I think that is very important for us all to look out to those moving into the series. As for a prediction, I don't feel comfortable really saying that. I don't think that it's my place to really predict my own series. So I guess we'll probably leave the prediction up to you, Mike, in this one, unless Colonel has something to add there.
I mean, I'll say my little piece about it, but I'm not predicting my own series. I've played against Albany, I think at least twice this season, and both games we played were extremely, extremely tight. Like they were both, I'm pretty sure both 1-goal games, and it came down to basically who could trap defense better. Like once one team got the lead, it was just kind of try to hang on to it. And we've played some really good team defense against Albany, and likewise they've played some really good team defense against us. So I'm not 100% sure what way this series is going to go, but you definitely, like you were saying, you got to watch out for a couple players like our offense and Gumba and Drake. They've got actually a really good offense from defensive Golgi plays. So Golgi and their goaltenders, both of them, are going to be difference makers on it. So, but yeah, Mike, if you want to predict the series, you can go. That's about all I got to say about it.
Yeah, you know what? I'll predict the series. Screw it. All right, now before I predict the series, it is offense against goaltending. This is going to be a great series. But if Albany can't get some goals on, because Syracuse has some great goaltending, if Galley wants to show up to games, that is. Otherwise, they have to rely on Wizard of Osgood for 4 games, which is not a bad person to rely on. So I'm going to give this series to Syracuse just because of the offense. Syracuse in 6. That's my prediction. Syracuse in 6.
I like that prediction, Mike.
But I mean, I think the series could go either way. I mean, I got a lot of respect for the guys in Albany. Played against them 3 times this season. We were fortunate to win the 3 games I was a part of. But I mean, each game could have went either way. I mean, they truly have a great team. And, I have a lot of respect for them. And, I think it's going to be a really big 1-versus-4 series. They pushed us a lot to, kind of grab the Eastern Northeast title. They made a mad charge at the end of the season. We managed to fend them off at that point in time. But, it's going to be a challenge. I think that it's going to be a great series. And I think it could easily go either way.
Now, this is going to be the series. All right? This is a series to end all series in round 2, that is. All right? Norfolk versus Worcester in round 2. Hutch, start us off.
All right, so similar to the last series, I'll just do a little, pre-up before I actually go into my prediction. So obviously we have Norfolk versus Worcester, 2-versus-3. Looking back at the season series, they played 2 games, and each team won 1. Looking back at it, Norfolk outscored Worcester 9-5. It's kind of hard to judge when there's only 2 games played in the run of a season, so it's going to be a really intense series. You got Norfolk coming out with I-Transitions, Alien 905, and of course Wonger. And Worcester's going to come back at them with Wheelhouse. They made some key acquisitions in the season, picking up Red Bomber on defense and Joe K5 in net. I think those were 2 key pickups during the season that I think is really going to help them in a series. However, when it's all said and done, I think that Norfolk does walk away with the series, winning 4-2. So that's Norfolk in 6, and that's my prediction.
Colonel?
This is definitely, I agree with Mike on this one. It's definitely the series to watch, I think, out of this round. I'm really intrigued. I don't know if Worcester has what it takes to take down Norfolk, because on paper I look at it and I see Norfolk is my favorite out of the 2, but you never know what's going to happen, and I would never count out Killhouse and his crew he's got assembled over there. I know Norfolk's been stronger. They really took out the Bears in their first round series. Worcester had a little bit maybe of a tougher road against Springfield than Norfolk did against the Bears. But Norfolk is hot right now, coming off a sweep, and as if they needed it. I mean, they've been doing it excellent all season, and it's going to be extremely interesting to see who comes in on top with this one, because I think it's going to go 6 or 7 games. So I'm still going to go with my gut here and say Norfolk's going to come in on top, but it would not surprise me at all to see Worcester take them out, because they are a threat. Like, they can put goals behind Norfolk, and Norfolk's got a really good top line. I'm not sure Worcester can hang with Norfolk's top line, but 2-3 versus 2-3, I really can't say. It's kind of a toss up. So I'll go with Norfolk and 6 for this one.
All right. I'm not. You guys said just about everything that needs to be said. All right. I've been on Norfolk all season. In my opinion, if you guys didn't go on your nasty run at the end of the season, they'd be number one. So I'm going with Norfolk in 6 as well.
I think that you gave us a little inspiration there, to go 9-0 in the last week. I think all the guys kind of heard you say that Norfolk was going to take the conference title. So, it was kind of a little bit of inspiration for us. So I guess we kind of thank you for that, Mike.
All right. We're going to move on to the West Coast. We're going to talk about OKC versus Toronto. Hutch, go.
All right, so this is another interesting series in my opinion. We always, we've been talking about Toronto quite a bit, and Oklahoma City for that much. Toronto the first couple weeks was kind of riding high there in the number 1 slot, and those forfeits in week 2, I believe it was, really caused them to kind of fall off the horse as such. They fell way down in the standings, way down to actually number 8 at one point in time. Clawed their way back. Did a very impressive series number 1. Made it into the second round. I think a lot of people were kind of surprised that Toronto made it past Rockford. At the same time, though, they still had this team that, was kind of riding high in the first couple of weeks. So for that, I don't think that we can necessarily count them out. Oklahoma City, though, they've been the powerhouse of the West all season. They've kind of lost a step or two in the last couple of weeks, lost a bit of ground to Rochester, but they were able to maintain their Western Conference title. They edged out Syracuse by 1 point to grab the President's Trophy. I honestly don't see Toronto taking out OKC. They did win the season series, but it was only one game and they outscored them 3-2. But there's a couple interesting notes to look at here. Oklahoma City, Laffy Taffy was probably their best player, their best forward anyway, all season. In the playoffs, he went 0-2 with 1 point. They're really going to need to rely on their goaltending, which I think they've done quite a bit all season. Nothing against the rest of their players, but I think that their goaltending has been outstanding and it's probably stole them quite a few wins along the way. Broder is going to have a heavy workload. I'm not entirely sure what happened to Leprechaun in round 1. He didn't play at all. I don't really know the story behind this, but, they're really going to need him to come back. Toronto does have some skill, so, they will need their goaltending to kind of carry on the way they've been all season.
Didn't Leprechaun go on IR for the last week of the season as well?
I think he did, and I'm kind of surprised because he did come off of IR before the series, but he did not play, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. So, looking at Toronto, I think that, they do have quite a few pieces to come into battle with Oklahoma City. They got Wagner, who obviously ran away with the playoff scoring in round 1. They've got Forsey, he's a force to be reckoned with, and of course they've got their goalie by Mercy and Grace. He's had a little bit of run in here in Syracuse, but overall I think he's a pretty solid goaltender, and he's really going to have to solidify things back there to help Toronto against Oklahoma City. Unfortunately for the Marlies, though, I think that Oklahoma City wins this series 4-1, so I'm going to take OKC in 5 games.
All right, Colonel.
I really think that this series is going to come down to OKC's goaltending and defense, because if the Marlies come at them hot like they have been, Wagner's got his 17 points, and they scored 9 goals in the first 2 games. So they scored 9 in game 1, they scored 9 in game 2. I don't know if they can keep up that. I don't know what happened if Rockford kind of gave up or whatever, but if you're playing a game, there's no way that you can just give up 9 goals and they all be accidents. Something's going on there, and it just kind of blows my mind how it even happens, because it never seems to happen to me, where I can get into a game and score 9 goals and beat somebody 9-1. It's just such a crazy discrepancy between the score. It's like, did you even try to play the game? Like, I don't really know if they just gave up after like 5 or 6 or what happened. But I think if Leprechaun doesn't play and Broder can't hold up his, we'll say his absence, I don't know. I think the Marlies might actually take this series because on paper it seems like they've got better forwards. I mean, OKC might have a better top line. But after that, like I said, the Marlies might be a little bit stronger in second and third over OKC's second and third. So it's going to come down to defense and goaltending. But I'd say this one's going to go 7 games, and I'm going to take the Marlies in 7.
Upset alert. All right. OKC, Toronto, and, surprisingly, I'm actually going to go with Colonel on this. I'm going to say Toronto in 7. It's all going to come down to the offense of Toronto. If Toronto can get on the goaltending of OKC early and often, especially if Leprechaun doesn't show up for a second straight week, Toronto's got it in 7. All right, moving on, we're going to talk about the Rochester Americans versus the Utica Comets. Hutch, start us off.
All right, well, I think this is going to be a very interesting series. I mean, personally, I think in the West, I think that Rochester is the team to beat. I know Oklahoma City has been strong all season, but I think that Rochester has really shown in the past couple of weeks that they're probably the team in the West to beat. Rochester won this season series 4-1. They outscored Utica 26-17. So, they've played 5 games, obviously a division rivalry here. I think it really comes down to what Zolomon can do for Utica. But I personally don't think that Utica can compete with the line of Hertz, Army of One, and Ennis. I think that this is probably the best line in the AHL right now. Personally, first line versus first line, I'm not sure if there's any other first line out there that can take down this line. But, it ultimately comes down to who's playing on defense and who's playing goalie as well. So, Utica is really going to have their handful dealing with that line. They can play 3 of 7 games if it makes it that far. So, I mean, that could be 3 wins for Rochester. I don't believe, personally, that it's going to go that far. Utica, like I said, is going to need a strong performance from Zolomon. They're going to need AEB to stand up. They're going to need their new goaltender, Elias. He's going to have to, bring that momentum that he's developed from round 1. But personally, I think that Rochester wins this series in 6 games. I personally don't think that Utica has what it takes to take out Rochester. But, it remains to be seen. And, if they can, that's great for them. But personally, I don't see Utica beating Rochester.
All right, Colonel.
I'm pretty much on Hutch's page here. I really don't see Utica coming back and beating the Americans. And like you said, it's basically because of their top line. I mean, the Hertz Army of One line. If they can, like you said, pull out his 3 wins, I don't see Utica being good enough to overcome that and get 4 on the rest of the team. So basically, what I think is going to happen is this is going to be over in 6 games, and I think that Rochester comes in on top because Utica probably will steal a game or 2 with their goaltending. But I really don't think they've got the offense to keep up with that top line and their second line. Rochester's got a good second line as well. So I'm pretty sure this one's going to end in 6 games or even less, and Rochester's going to come in on top.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on Rochester. Rochester is the team to beat in the West, in my opinion. So I'm going to go Rochester in 5 over Utica. I don't think the goaltending will hold up. I think Rochester is going to go at them early and often, just like I said about OKC and Toronto series. If the Toronto can go at OKC's goaltending early and often, they'll get the win. If Rochester goes against Utica's goalies, gets after Utica's goalies early and often, they're going to get the win. All right. So, players to watch. Hutch, start us off with some players to watch.
All right, so one person that I'm going to list as my player to watch, and was kind of a player that I just alluded to, and I think that's Zolomon 93 in Utica. In order for Utica to get past Rochester, he's going to have to come up really big in this series. Kind of had a mediocre round 1. He went 1-1-0. He did have 4 goals, but only 4 points. However, I think we have to look back to the regular season. He led the AHL at 47 goals, finished second in points with 70. He was 9-7-0, so he's kind of hovering around that 500 mark. But I know he's a great player. I played against him. We managed to win against Utica when we played them. But Zolomon, he's a force out there. So, he's really going to have to bring it in this series. He's going to have his hands full with that first line in Rochester. And as Colonel said, Rochester does have a lot of depth. But in order for Utica to do anything in this series, I think that Zolomon really has to bring his game.
All right, Colonel?
For me, I think you're going to want to watch basically Rochester's top line, but I will pick out one here and say NS63. I think he's going to be instrumental in their defeat of the Utica Comets. So I just got a feeling that he had a really good first round. They swept the Ono Griffins. So I think they're going to carry that momentum in, and his line will do really well, and I'll just pick him this time because I feel like I've talked about the other two guys before in previous shows. But yeah, NS63, player to watch for sure in round 2.
All right, I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to go with the goaltending of Syracuse. Look for Wizard of Osgood to be lights out, just like he was in round 1 against Wilkes-Barre Scranton. But is Galley going to show up for games?
It's a good question.
That is key for Syracuse. If Galley can show up for games, because Wizard of Osgood can only play 4, and with I don't see, not that Wizard of Osgood isn't a great goalie, I don't see him taking all 4, and you don't want to push this to 7 games because you're having goaltending issues.
Yeah, and I mean, it really depends on how successful Albany is at setting up Counter-Strike tournaments, because apparently, Galley's really interested in that, so, I don't really mean to give them the key to beat us in the series, but, if they set up some Counter-Strike tournaments, I'm sure that Galley will be quite interested in that.
He just can't resist Counter-Strike, and he also just can't resist Fluffy Pillow, because he likes to sleep in for his games.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have in this episode of the LG Wheelhouse. From myself, Hutch, and Colonel, LG, have a good one.
Yes, no, I'm being told that Average Joe's does not have enough players and will be forfeiting the championship match.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.